Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төлөвчтэй. Өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор НҮБ-ын Хүнс хөдөө аж ахуйн байгууллагын Монгол дахь Суурин төлөөлөгч ноён Vinod Ahuja оролцож байна.
Винод Ахужа нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын Хүнс хөдөө аж ахуйн байгууллагын Монгол дахь Суурин төлөөлөгч. Ноён Винод Ахужа нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын Хүнс хөдөө аж ахуйн байгууллагын Монгол дахь Суурин төлөөлөгчөөр томилогдохоос өмнө Хүнс хөдөө аж ахуйн байгууллагын Аз номхон далайн бүсийн оффист мал аж ахуйн бодлогын асуудал хариуцсан мэргэжилтнээр ажиллаж байсан. Мөн 1998-аас 2009 онд энэ этгээгийн Ахмедабад мужийн энэ этгийг улсын удирдлагын институтад багшилж 1994-өөс 1997 онд Вашингтон дахь Дэлхийн банкнд ажиллаж байсан туршлагатай ба хамтын ажиллагаа ядуурал, орлогын хуваарлалт, хөдөө аж ахуйн үйлчилгээ, худалдааны тогтолцооны шилжилт, хүнсний баталгаат байдал, шимт хижээл зэрэг тулгамдж байгаа олон асуудлаар өргөн сэдвийн хүрээнд олон судалгааны өгүүлэл нийтлүүлж байсан. Азид маш олон төсөл хөтөлбөр хэрэгжүүлсэн бөгөөд малчид фермерүүдийн хэрэгцээнд тулгуурласан үйлчилгээний шинэ модель бий болгоход хамтын хүчин чармаалт түншлэлийг чухалчлан дэмжиж ажилладаг. Өрхийн хүнсний баталгаат байдал, шимт хижээлийн байдлыг сайжруулах, эмзэг бүлгийн эмэгтэйчүүдийг чадваржуулах чиглэлд сүүн бүтээгдэхүүний салбарыг тууштай дэмжиж ирсэн. Сүүн бүтээгдэхүүний аж ахуй эрхлэлтийг дэмжих байгууллагаас түүний Азийн сүүн бүтээгдэхүүний салбарт оруулсан хувь нэмрийг үнэлж 2016 оны Азийн шилдгээр шалгаруулсан.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Welcome again to my program. We were a year ago or so when you just arrived. And what is the development since that you arrived, and what is some works you have done, challenges you face, please?
Well, yes. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation again and the opportunity to share, the thinking and also the work that we are doing in Mongolia. It's been really a very wonderful year for us. We have a large number of ongoing projects, but if I was to sort of look at the range of the project, I would characterize them into 5 broad areas. One is we are looking at policies that directly affect food security and nutrition, particularly on food safety. And this is being done in partnership with Mofali, of course, the Ministry of Agriculture, but also the World Health Organization. This is a joint project we have. We're looking at risk-based surveillance of food chain and the legislations and policies that need to be put in place. Our core area traditionally has been looking at agricultural production, animal production, and so on. And there again, we have ongoing projects in sort of animal genetics. We are trying to look at new practices which are more climate resilient and climate smart. We call them climate smart. So there are projects going on in that area, primarily looking at productivity. The third area is what we call the value chain from production to the consumer, and how do you improve the efficiency. And our perspective really there is how do you make them more inclusive in the sense that you can create more employment through these value chains. Which means you need to integrate small producers into this, which means you need to capacitate them. Which means you need to discover new models that will absorb local and youth and also women into this one. So that's one big area that we're working on. We have a project there supported by European Union and also some of the projects supported by our own resources. The fourth area is where we're looking at forest, so sustainable forest management, and that links closely with larger landscape in terms of natural resource management. And the final area that we are active in is disaster and resilience. at the end, when we look at climate change and changing weather patterns, we really need to invest hugely on building more resilient livelihoods.
Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, due to the current situation in the world about this virus, etc. Let's talk about the food security issue. What is the situation in Mongolia? Well, now the world is saying that this health care level of several countries are warned, including Mongolia in particular at this time, and yet these countries like Mongolia, Cambodia is not yet that infection happened. It doesn't mean that it is not happening, but however, nowadays we are very much concerned about food security, where 90% almost of our food comes from those which is importing, almost coming from China. And in that light, please tell us, what is the food security level in the country? What are the challenges?
Well, I think there has not been a major impact on the immediate food security in the country yet. But events like this do raise the larger question of how do you secure your food, and not just secure in terms of the quantities, but in terms of the quality and the safety of it. I think that's the important one. And that really brings us to this larger question. I mean, so these kind of events is one thing now, because the world is becoming more integrated. Trade is people's movements and so on. Also, more and more people are now living in urban areas, and they are actually accessing their food from the supermarkets and so on. So I think the whole food system is changing quite dramatically. And this is where we always we emphasize on ensuring safe and affordable food, and we also emphasize on diversity of food, because our approach to nutrition is really a food-based approach, and the more diverse food that you have, the healthier immune system that you have, more protected you are from these kind of events. So that's where we see, and that's a challenge for Mongolia, and that's a challenge that we are going to look at going into the future. And this is not going to be easy, particularly sort of with 80% of Mongolians living in urban areas and the food coming from where it is going to come from. So that's where the projects like what we have on food safety and helping the governments to put in place right kind of policies is important.
So you say diversity of food is a problem.
Definitely.
Traditionally, Mongolians are more relying on meat, milk product, but in Ulaanbaatar city, the meat is available. Let's talk first about the meat. 80% or so of meat eaten in Ulaanbaatar city are prepared in not industrial way. It is in very old traditional way. The people are staying there and just killing the animal, slaughtering, and then dividing things with the hand and all this stuff. Are there any concern about that?
Yes, I mean there are always concerns about sanitary handling of food. And when you handling in processing and also handling while you're eating it, so that remains a concern. And clearly, when it comes to processing and so on, we have the standards that we work with the governments. We also do need to work at the consumer level.
Okay.
In terms of raising awareness about sanitation, raising awareness about safe handling of food. And so on. So that's also part of one of the projects that we are working on. And it's not just about the safety part of it. It's also about how you make your food choices. It's not always meat and wheat that you pick. And when it comes to For example, drinks, you don't always go and pick a Coke or a Sprite. These are also the food, which the processed food in particular with high sugar, high sodium, high, sort of starch and so on. These are actually bad for you. So we want to work with the universities and with the schools in raising awareness about what is a diet, what's a healthy diet, and how do you access safe food. But I also think that, I've been trying to look at some of the data, and the data on how people are making food choices is rather weak. So unless you understand how people are making food choices, how these patterns are shifting over time, it's also difficult to come up with very concrete responses. So we are now analyzing some of the data that NSO collects, for example, and they have very well-designed surveys, household expenditure, what people are eating, but they have not been analyzed from the household food choice perspective. And we're working with them on looking at some of that. We want to understand these things before we actually start prescribing.
Yeah, what I'm saying was about the meat. How sustainable is this way Ulaanbaatar people eat meat? And what is the reason behind that ratio of industrially processed and hand processed keep staying there 80 to 20%?
Food habits are, you form food habits when you are very young. And food habits take a long time to change. One can definitely bring some improvement in terms of sanitation, safety, and so on. I don't think we necessarily have to go the industrially processed food to make it safe. You can bring in safety elements also in the traditional food practices.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we would focus on. So to me, it's really not about the 80-20, but how safe your food is.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the milk. I recently also wrote an article called "Milk is the health of future nation." And you also commented on that. What is the barrier, or what stops Mongolia to deliver to each school, girl, school boy, with milk every day? We have a school lunch program. Before it was school tea program, now school lunch program. And why we cannot include milk there, like many other countries try, in particular in Asia, Thailand, where you were working. Please tell us.
Yeah, so I think, well, let me first say the dairy, of course, is traditionally, it's a Mongolian, in Mongolia, it's a traditional activity. So, people know it very well. It's close to people's heart. Traditional processing has been, what it has been. What we need to do is figure out, given the geography of this country and given the weather patterns of this country, what is the most suitable dairy development model? And I think Mongolia is still experimenting with that a little bit. The supply chain and the value chains that you need to put in place is not going to be the same like what you will do in Thailand and what you will do in India. There are good experiences around, and we can certainly draw from that. But Mongolia is very unique in many respects, particularly because of geography and because of weather. So we need organizational models, and we need the technologies that are suited to Mongolia. Those technologies are available. We have tried in other countries, and we want to try it here as well. But I think this is where I see the challenge. I also think that if I look at the successful experiences around the region, typically we need to have strong independent institutions to draw it, because you would not figure it out in 1 year or 2 years. It's a process. But if you have an institution which is independent, which has a certain mandate, has certain resources, and is accountable, then so Thailand's case is one of that. India's case is one of that. India has a very strong, autonomous, independent institution to drive dairy development. Thailand has the same. So wherever there have been institutions like this that successful.
And Mongolia has not.
And Mongolia so far doesn't. We have been discussing this with the ministry, and I hope that we will be able to promote an institution like this, which can be given a mandate.
Very funny. Mongolia has not owned dairy production development institution. Yet I saw the Mongolian government resolution to create Asia Dairy Organization, regional, continental regional organization in Mongolia. What is that about?
Well, this is a platform. I would call it a platform which allows countries around the region to share experiences. The good news is that in Asia now we have really very good experiences in dairy sector. We don't necessarily have to rely on European models or American models that we needed to maybe 40 or 50 years ago. Now we have our own Asian experiences, both good ones and not so good ones. The Dairy Asia is mainly a platform for people for the countries to share experiences and also perhaps support some of these models.
Well, this is a kind of headquarters for Asian countries to share their experiences, mostly, right, in database, etc. What else? This purpose of that organization?
So as I said, mainly it will be about sharing experiences, but it will also be, we can also promote, for example, research alliances through this. There are areas, for example, dairy and greenhouse gases. Now, India is doing quite a bit of research on dairy and greenhouse gases. I know, for example, Thailand also has fairly a mature research program on this one. They can collaborate. When it comes to genetics, Thais have invested in genetic improvement, something that suits them. Indians have done that. Pakistan has its own. So how do we build on some of these experiences? Again, there are very bad experiences that we want to avoid and good ones that we want to build on.
Okay, so basically we may talk about cows that is more productive in terms of milk, right?
Yes, the cows being more productive, that's fundamental. And how is it that you then collect the milk, process the milk, and make sure that the milk, safe milk reaches the consumer, while at the same time the herders or the farmers receive a large share of the consumers. That's really what the organization is about.
That's a problem in Mongolia. Because, as you said, due to geography and weather and the scarce populations, it's hard to collect and bring into a processing center. And I hope this Asia Milk Organization can help Mongolia to go a little bit faster on this path. Let's a bit talk about food waste management. I think what you find in Mongolia, what is way to solve?
What we find in Mongolia, that's a difficult question because, but let me just sort of say this at a more global level, what the situation is. The global estimate is that about a third of food that is produced on this planet never gets consumed. That's a huge waste. I mean, we are talking about almost $1 trillion lost at the global level. About 1/3 or half of it comes from developing countries where the poverty is, where the food insecurity is. It's also a huge tax on the environment because we are producing this food. 8% of the water that gets used for agricultural production is just lost. So there is no, even if we do not know very precise estimates at each country level yet, because there are definitional issues. Very few countries actually have good estimates of how much food is wasted,
including Mongolia.
Mongolia also doesn't have very good estimates. There are two ways that we can get these estimates. One is FAO tries to calculate these food balance sheets.
Okay.
And in that food balance sheets, it tries to get a little bit of an estimate on how much of the food is lost during processing, during collection, and rectification. But those are broad estimates.
Okay.
Countries which have done very specific surveys, Philippines have done some good surveys, and they try to look at each food, how much of it is getting wasted. India has some good surveys as well. But I mean, whether we have the surveys or not, there is no reason for us to waste food in any case.
Yeah. And it is also education matter. You just prepare as much as you want, not more. Once you prepare it, you eat it. And when people go to, for example, buffet or some kind of their way of food, you can take more. People are taking more, and then they just waste it.
Yeah.
It's a personal responsibility issue.
Yeah.
Also, right? And also the food waste management of each restaurant.
Yeah.
Whether it goes to animals or what do they do to dogs, pets. In that sense, somehow this country is keeping silence. In society, we don't talk about that part. Let's talk also about so-called digital agriculture. What is that about?
Well, I'll come to the digital agriculture, but if I can just sort of stay a little bit on the food loss and waste, and I want to share some, because the awareness is rising. Maybe not in Mongolia as much, perhaps there is, but if we look around in different countries, Korea is certainly doing a lot. China is doing, Singapore is doing a lot. Japan has laws in place now that actually restrict food waste. There are two kinds. One is what we call food loss, which is what gets lost before it reaches the table. And then there's the waste, which is after it actually
table waste.
Yeah, the table waste. So the more richer countries, there is more food waste than loss, because I think they have figured out their value chain. So processing, storage, those kind of losses are minimized, but then the loss happens at this. Whereas in the poorer countries, in the developing countries, it's the opposite. Because the processing is poor, because the storage is poor, because so you lose the food there, but then when it reaches the table, then you don't have that much waste because people don't want to waste.
Yes.
So there are very good experiences around in the region. Maybe we can talk about it at some time, either at another time and so on. But the good news is that the awareness is rising, and we have good experiences to build on. And but what is important is that we work closely with the industry, we work closely with the government, we work closely with the educational institutions, and also we look at what other experiences that there are, the technological experiences. There are now applications that you can use in India to aggregate.
Would be good if you help us to estimate how much we are losing in the processing or after the table, so that we can compare how scrupulously we approach to food.
Most certainly this is on our horizon in the next 1 or 2 years to try and come up with some good estimates of food losses and waste.
Okay, digital
agriculture. It's so what is digital agriculture? What is we actually call it e-agriculture.
Okay.
Right? What is e-agriculture? E-agriculture essentially is when we want to look at the policies, the tools, the protocols, the standards on how do you make best use of ICT, the new information and communication technologies, to support rural economy and agriculture sector, right? So that's a broad definition of it. The way we approach e-agriculture, there are ICT applications everywhere. You can just pick and choose and deploy them. But the way we have been approaching is a bit more systematic process. And this is FAO and ITU, the International Telecom Union. There's a partnership in which we are supporting various countries in this one. We look at two aspects. One is the ICT readiness of a country, how ready the country is in terms of its ICT infrastructure, ICT capacities, both human capacities and institutional capacities, laws and legislation that allow cross-sectoral collaborations or not. So these are the various elements that we look at from the ICT side. And then the agriculture side, similar thing, how ready agriculture side of a country is in terms of enabling environment to deploy ICT into this one. So if there is a country where the ICT readiness is not so good, and also agriculture policies and agriculture production, that means we can only do a bit of an experimentation, right? And then there is a path for more mature economies where ICT infrastructure is so well developed, agricultural policies are very well developed. That means you can actually now scale out the whole ICT applications.
Say in very simple terms, if each cow or horse has a kind of a chip that is connected back, like in New Zealand, to centralized data processing. A herdsman knows on his screen where are those animals. That's the very advanced level. But the lower level is where we know where the animal was born and what was the weight initially, how old is this, etc. Kind of ID for each cow, say. What is the situation in Mongolia in that sense?
Well, very interesting that you bring this up because we are currently in the middle of piloting a system like this in Overgangai IMAC in 4 zones. And what we are trying to do is register animals in that IMAC in 4 zones. We will register horses, large animals, which is mainly the cows, and also small animals, which is sheep and goat. The approach is going to be different depending upon the animal. As far as the large animals are concerned, we will tag all of them and we will start collecting information, and that will be linked to a database.
Tag here on the ear.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that will the information will be linked to the database. For the small animals, sheep and goat, we will we will identify them at the level of the herd, not necessarily at the level of the individual animal. Because that's a large population. And for horses, there will be those sort of injectable. I don't know what the terminology for that. We have a technical team who's working on it.
Okay.
But so these are the different approaches that we are. And the idea really is to be able to provide information on the history of animals.
Yes.
Before it goes to a slaughterhouse.
Overall, the current even mobile phone processing capacity is doable to registering 1,000, maybe 10,000, etc. So that is so key now in Mongolia in terms of productivity, so that the herdsmen can take care of as many as animals that they cannot imagine now. And it is also coming with the issue of pasture land availability. We talk nowadays about the productivity and availability of pasture land. We talk about the tax on animals. How do you see that?
The tax on the
pasture land tax on animals. If you put certain amount and above, you pay tax.
Yeah, I mean that's a contentious area. I know in Mongolia it has been discussed quite a lot. We of course our position is that there is a need for regulatory measures to limit the number of livestock, because number of livestock has really clearly exceeded the carrying capacity. Whether it comes in the form of a tax or whether it comes in some other forms, for example, giving more powers to the herders and having their own groups and managing those is a matter to be discussed. We think that there is a role for the tax, the grazing fees there. It's a question of how, what is the level and how it gets used.
Yeah, okay.
So those are matters of detail, but I think in principle, certainly there's a place.
Well, it was very interesting conversation, and I'm very enjoyed that within a year we can discuss all the issue about the most important, in fact, the vital sector of Mongolian economy, agriculture, animal husbandry. I would like to talk to you again, maybe in a year, more about maybe harvesting, more processing the land, etc. Anyway, thank you very much for coming to this talk again, and I wish success in this project, in particular this project, pilot project in the ＮҮБ-ын.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you. За хамтлагчдээ өнөөдөр манай дефактоны түүгийн зочноор хоёр дахь удаага орж ирээ. За энэ хүн бол ФАО гэж НҮБ-ын Хүнсний байгууллага байдаг. Түүний бич Суурин төлөөлөгч жилийн өмнө уулзсан. За Монгол ийм сони юмнууд хийж байгаа юм байна гэвэл жилийн дараа хийж ярих гэж төвлөрсөн. Их баярлалаа.